Thank you, Amit, Preeti, and Rajorshi for joining us today. My name is Deepshikha, and I represent SpeakIn. May I please welcome you to take a minute and introduce yourselves and give us your opening thoughts on the topic, and then we move into a more engaging conversation. May I start with Rajorshi?
Hi, thank you, Deepshikha. Good evening to all of you and all the participants. I think it's wonderful to be with all of you. My name is Rajorshi, and I am the president and global HR head of Alkem Laboratories. It's a $1.2 billion pharmaceutical company present in India and abroad. Overall, about 26 years of experience in different industry, primarily in pharmaceutical and majorly also after pharma, oil and gas. So good to be with all of you and my co-panelist. Welcome also to this show. So I think this topic which has been chosen is, I think, very apt. And I think all of us know that in the last probably 6 weeks, the whole world, at least India, and of course beyond 6 weeks, the whole world has undergone turmoil. We have never seen in this our lifetime, and at least we do hope that we don't see it going forward, that this get over as soon as possible. So I think if you look at any industry or you look at the economy as a whole, I think everything has been disrupted. The way we used to think, the way we used to do our business, the way we used to carry ourselves, the way we used to shop, live, take care of ourselves. I think everything has undergone change in these last few weeks. And the good part is that, all of us are learning rapidly to cope up with this kind of a change. And more so coming to organization, I think, it was like now when we remember, how we used to operate 6 weeks back, people used to say good old days, as if it was many years back. I think that's the major change that I see. And of course, we'll talk during the session. This crisis has also kind of, ignited a sense of creativity and innovation in all of us. At least I am from an industry which is essential goods. So at least some business is running. Even there are challenges and we are innovating. But I know there are many other businesses which are rethinking how to run, how to sustain. And even the businesses which are essential and running, I think we are sensing that there is a huge disruption in the way we have been, disruption in the way we will be kind of taking things ahead. I think I look forward to this discussion today and learn from all of you. Maybe with this, I'll end here and pass it on to others.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Preeti, may I now welcome you to share your opening thoughts and give us a very quick overview of what you're handling in terms of HR.
Sure. Thank you, Deepshikha. Thank you, everybody, the co-panelists and everybody who's joined us. I'm very excited to be on this panel. My name is Preeti Bose, and I head talent management and leadership development globally for Lupin. Been working for about 23 odd years in different industries and very, very passionate about the talent agenda. And just looking at some of the factoid, in terms of the news coverage and what the world is going through. And I was looking at one of these articles which said the usage of the term unprecedented in today's time has gone into at least 1 million times than it was used last year. That's as many number of times the word unprecedented has been used. And that aptly shows the kind of times that we are in, right? And Rajorshi mentioned that none of us have ever seen something like this in a lifetime. So not only are industries trying to cope, there are industries trying to make their way, trying to sustain. There are organizations which unfortunately are shutting down, having to, leave people be. Some of us are absolutely trying to be as agile, as nimble-footed. And before we move on to the conversation, I'd just like to say that the individuals, the leaders, the organizations that actually are agile, who innovate, who create, find out different ways and means to sustain not only for today, but plan for tomorrow, that's going to be the way for us. And with that, over to you, Beth.
Perfect. Amit, welcoming your views next, please.
Good evening, everyone. Hello to my co-panelists. Thanks for having me, Deepshikha and SpeakIn. I'm Amit Malik. I represent Aviva. I look after people function, customer service, operations, and retention for them, though I'm an HR guy who's now moved on to do a business role with over 20 years of experience. My opening thoughts on this topic, which is so relevant, disruption in organization culture, is that the world just came to a stop one day when we had a lockdown. Everything just stopped. And I think all of us have talked about VUCA, talked about disruption, but this is the first time we are actually experiencing it in its reality. So all that we talked about is what we are experiencing it. And I'm remembered about a businessman who was traveling on a plane. And when he was traveling, as all of us would know, the pilot just announced and said, I want you to go back to your seats and tie your seatbelt, and we will encounter some turbulence. So like the pilot said, the plane went through turbulence. There was thunder, lightning. The whole plane was, shaking. Everyone started to do their last prayers and, say their final goodbyes to gods, saying we wouldn't survive this. And then this businessman sees a small girl who's sitting there without worry and without any fear in the world. And everyone else is trembling. And when they land, the businessman goes up to her and says, why were you not afraid, when everyone else was? And the little girl says, my dad is a pilot and he's taking me home. And and when I heard this story, I absolutely related it to the organization culture, which is also our topic to say, do we have a culture as an organization where our managers or our leaders make people feel safe that we would take them home? Or the organization culture is such that it says, this too shall pass, and help people believe that we will look after them. And I think that's the disruption that we are encountering, and that's the need from a culture standpoint that we need to communicate. So those are my opening thoughts.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, all three. I would now, start by talking about three critical trends that we are seeing as far as the manpower is concerned. And there are different factions of manpower, right? I mean, you have on one side, whether you have Lupin or Alkem, we're talking about a plant-driven organization, right? You have massive R&D, you have massive workforce, which is to an extent, hands-on work. And there is Aviva, which is you have a massive distribution system. You have some people, on ground, the sales force that you have. So how are you managing? What do you think are implications in terms of workforce distribution, impact on different kinds of people? What do you think will be the corporate implication of this? Preeti, if I were to come to you, what do you think are the changes coming up in the corporate world, the corporate HR?
Sure. And Deepshikha, how we see is, of course, people with large distribution on ground. Business has been not as usual. The plants are working, of course, because as an organization, we also do a lot of life-saving drugs. So that's our essential services. So the plants are on, but the sales force, unfortunately, when the market is shut, so is the sales force, right? There's been a fantastic time on how we keep going back and reskilling and how do you reprioritize, etc. So all those strategic conversations are definitely happening. As far as the corporate HR team is concerned, a lot of focus again. So people first has always been a motto, but I think another re-energizing time to focus again and say, what is it that we want to do? What are the key initiatives that we want to take, not only for today, but for tomorrow? Are there any changes, big term changes that we want to bring about? Because historically as an organization, we probably didn't have work from home as much in India as different parts of the organization probably, right? Or different organizations do, FMCGs do, the ITES sector does this tremendously well, right? But the pharma organization maybe not as much. And a lot of conversations now to see what are the policies, at least human capital policies, how will we hire people? For example, talent no longer needs to be in the office primarily, and this 1.5 months have shown us that people can work from home, given that we have the right infrastructure, we have the contracting between the manager, the leader, and the team members, the small term in the small town, the talent from smaller places. They also have an opportunity these days because, right now, how I see this is a brilliant platform for now, time for us to, just look inside, refocus, and prioritize for what's going to be the tomorrow for us, because we will survive, we will sustain, but I think the agile organizations would be truly the ones who think about what next and how.
So, Rajorshi, if I were to come to you, what are the three trends that you think an HR leader of today should be wary of or should be aware of? What are you going to see in the next 3, 6, 9 months?
So, the few things that we should be wary of, and it's already being discussed. I think number one is, how we were used to doing work. I mean, the earlier definition of accomplishing work or achieving productivity was that, you be in an office or in a workplace. So I think that's going to get challenged. Uh, number That's number one. So, whether it's work from home or you do in a virtual way, I mean, that's going to get challenged for sure. The second thing that I'm going to see, which I'm seeing, is that, the employee safety and health. I think that's something will be of a concern. And maybe earlier we were all taking care or talking about it in a different way. But that's something, we'll have to kind of assimilate in everything that we do. And when I say, health and all, it's not just because of COVID, but social distancing, how we sit, how we kind of enter, how we kind of discuss, or how the canteen would look like. So there will be a lot of kind of implications on the health. The third thing which I see, I think that will be something of a concern. The people, I'm not concerned, I would say that's an opportunity. And why I say it's a concern, it may be concern for few, that organization will perhaps now, find out different ways to work. I think the last 6 weeks, and when I talked to several of my colleagues in different industry, they are all saying that we never knew that the work could be done in so effective way in a different form. For example, we were used to certain manning norms, we were used to certain number of people coming to work. Those are getting challenged. So you may still achieve productivity and delivery by not really working the way we were working. So why it's also a concern for such, because that may lead to job losses. That may lead to, certain other downsizing, layoff in certain industries, and specifically the industry which are probably not essential, or, in all kinds of industries. So these three, I think, I see as a challenge, or is some kind of a trend. And something that we can't ignore is the organization culture. The organization culture, which will now evolve, would be of a very different nature. I mean, probably it will be, less hierarchy driven. It will be open. It would be networked. Less of, policies, practices. It could be probably more kind of, you just come, do the work, deliver, and move on. I think that would be kind of culture I see. Of course, in all this, as a head of HR and head of any organization, empathy is also something we have to retain. Sure. I mean, while there are a lot of these anxieties, we cannot let go of empathy. I think that's, to me, will be essential.
Okay, excellent. So we spoke about, I think the biggest issue, of course, for an organization right now is, which we are seeing, especially as the governments are putting the onus on the organization and the businesses themselves with respect to the employee safety. And of course, the leading issues around it. I think that's the most immediate priority, as you rightly said. Amit, from the other side, if I were an employee, for me, the biggest issue right now is becoming job loss. That lingering feeling of uncertainty, irrespective of the organization that I'm working for, whether I'm working for a multi-billion-dollar company or a startup. One, what do you think are the areas where organizations can help people phase out? So that's the job loss that I'm talking about. And then we'll talk about the opportunities also. So what can organizations do to make the exit easier? You can't make it easy, but what are the actions? Are you seeing there is a trend? Are people getting prepared? Are the organizations getting prepared?
See, I think while there has been a lot of talk about organizations wanting to lay off or cut salaries, and initially when the lockdown happened in the last week of March, A lot of people went. But if you look at the trend, it's got reversed. There are 2 or 3 major and big organizations who have between last 3 days announced that they are not doing salary cuts for April, or they are reversing their decisions to salary cuts. So I think organizations are also starting to look at this whole point to say, how do they balance business metrics with people experience? And I think that is something that the organizations will have to weigh very, very clearly. You know, like Rajorshi said, some organizations will have to take a call at some point in time, which I see happening in the later half of the year and not immediate, you know, also because of a lot of government pressure, reputation risk to happen later, to say we will optimize or right size and do what is right, because in the end, organization has to look after what it can afford, and you know, from both a customer and an employee standpoint. So that will happen. But as of now, the good news is a lot of people have gone back, you know, even to pay salaries. From an employee standpoint, I think this is something that the employees have it in their mind, and this is also one of the reasons of anxiety, which is high anxiety to every employee, no matter what the organization says, because employee is also aware of the ecosystem that he or she lives in, and you know, knows that this is the reality. Coming to your question of what the organization needs to do at this stage of getting themselves ready, and you know, I think the first and foremost question that the organization needs to ask is it a first resort or is it a last resort? And if it is a first resort, then I think the HR head needs to stand up and demonstrate courage and conviction to challenge that why is it the first resort? So it has to be the last resort. I think second point is, if you have to go down that path and you have no other choice, I think that's where the whole values of the organization come in, to say, how do as an organization you make it you make it in line with your company values, and you make it as much painless as you can. You can never remove the pain, because no such conversation or a decision can remove the pain from an employee standpoint. So how much do you make it, you know, respectful, in line with your values, and painless? Third, what are you doing to upskill that employee in the interim that the employee is there with you? So if you as an HR leader today know that this is a call that you may have to take with, say, 10%, 5%, 15% of your workforce 6 months down the line, what are you doing today as your responsibility to upskill all of them, so that when they go back into that workforce, they are upskilled. So it's your time to invest in them rather than take away the investment. And and I think that's something that you would obviously do. And those are the 3 things that I think one needs to watch out. Obviously, there are outplacement services which will be there. How do you manage them to land? You call up your colleagues in the industry and see if you can get someone a job, and do all of those services. And I'm not going into that because people as HR leaders are experienced to do that. But I think those are the couple of things that one needs to really, really focus on.
So great, fantastic point. Now let me take the positive side of things. Of course, we are seeing a lot of changes, as you talked about learning, and then some of the other areas. There is hope also out there. There are still people, there are organizations which are, toying between the last resort and the first resort. And then there are organizations which are seeing this as an opportunity to invest in talent. Maybe this is a good time while everybody else is, so there is no FOMO, so to say. Sab aaram kar rahe hain. So Preeti, what do you think, if I have to put that question to you, what do you think would be the areas of opportunity? Where do you think you would see a surge, if any, and to what extent in terms of the job gain that'll come, particularly in the Indian context?
Sure. So Deepshikha, 2-3 elements there. One is that this is a fantastic time to upskill people, right? It is the capability time. You also take focus because people who are in critical functions, business, etc., there's hardly ever time for them to come into sessions or webinars and just upskill themselves. So this is a fantastic time, like I said, to again take stock of where you are, where you want to be. There are organizations like Air Asia. I was just reading, and we have people there, and one of my ex-Mondelez colleagues heads HR there globally, and we, I just heard that they invested in 2.5 lakh hours of learning, right? Of all the people. TCS, I heard that the number of hours that they have spent in, over meetings and calls and business meetings and training, etc., is phenomenal. Likewise for our organization and so many others. I think L&T has become such a key area, and talent upskill has become such a focus that people are building that. That's the big one. Second is again for individuals to sit back and say, I've been doing this job for a certain number of years. Is this whatever I want to do for the rest of my life or whatever number of time? And again, take stock of that. So, and a good reflection time for people as well. The third one I also saw in one of the questions, I think Sushil asked this question, Is this going to lead to a gig economy? And I definitely think yes, because talent is no longer dependent on the physicality of it. And again, organizations also have to think about and look at their job descriptions, and maybe they should have two parts to say, is this job critical to come to work, come to office physically, or can it be done from a distance remotely, right? So JDs could also undergo that significant chain of how do you view people and how do you view talent. Like I said at the start of this conversation, gig economy, yes. Talent accessibility can be a big one for us because we don't necessarily need people to now relocate, shift, move. People can be where they are, and if the job permits, why not, right? Specialist roles, I don't know how much it is possible in Indian context, because the mindset is about being with one organization, staying there for far longer, etc. But the millennials have already been doing it for long. Deepshikha, and I see a lot of the youngsters who don't want to be tied down to a 9-to-5 job. So for them, life is far more flexible and fluid. And maybe that should become the norm for us as well. And there's a learning that we can take from millennials on how to really balance our life priorities with our passion and hobbies and everything that we do. Because I don't see too many youngsters trying to say, this is my job 9 to 5 and that is it's going to be, right? So I have people who have their rock bands, people who are singing, people who are traveling the world, who are travel bloggers and Instagram influencers, right? So that's another change that I see. And I think it's a healthy one for organizations to reflect, to say, how do we also create far more balance? And if I have another thing to add, I was talking to this managing partner who takes care of talent at Deloitte. And he was saying that they are looking at having far more women in their workforce. And given, if people meet the criteria, why not? Because they've realized that the barriers that a lot of women had initially of, the work pressures, home pressure, inability to travel as much probably. And now we have people doing board meetings across the world over Zoom or Microsoft Teams.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a fantastic time that we have seen that physicality doesn't take away from anything unless you really, really have to be on a line, on a production line or something where you need to be physically present. A lot of jobs can be done remotely. It all needs a culture of empowerment, ensuring your data security, everything is taken care of.
Absolutely.
I see there's a fantastic opportunity for us to, I think, just...
Great. I do think that data security is a completely, a very deep topic in itself. And I think that'll start emerging as people kind of settle with the initial health, the health part of this entire situation. But coming to Rajorshi, what do you think that, currently, as Amit was saying, that, there's a lot of anxiety. And also, as Preeti mentioned about, the whole transition to a gig economy and people being flexible in a way, how do you keep your people motivated? We have on one spectrum the traditional ways of engaging, and we've seen people dancing on the floors. We've seen all kinds of things, the clowns being invited, and all kinds of things being done to, just morale booster, khush karne ke liye, just let's take some pressure off. Once we get into a remote situation, there is not so much face-to-face happening. How do you keep your employees motivated and still attached to the organization?
No, I think it's a valid question. I think the advantage of working in an office or in a physical workplace is you get to meet each other. So, you discuss, you walk around, you meet people, which doesn't happen in a remote working. So I think one of the powerful way to engage people working remotely is how do you, constantly communicate with them, connect with them through digital platforms, of course, telephone, videos, and constantly involve them in tasks which they enjoy. And of course, there is one set of tasks which is work related, but off work related also. Can you engage them? Can you engage their family? And over the last few weeks, I have seen that, people are sometimes engaging their family, because the advantage is when you are sitting in the home, of course, if your family is willing to kind of come to the video calls or something, you also kind of get to know them better. You discover hidden talent of people. I mean, I remember somebody did a orchestra over online. Just to kind of make the employees feel good. So almost 100 employees came together, and each one had their own singing talent or playing a musical instrument. They did it. That's one part of it. So you try to connect with the family. I think the more important is, the work from home also cannot be mistaken as, you do anything at your own will. So the best way to motivate here is, of course, you discover a rhythm of work here. Like you used to go to office every day at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., start some of your meetings, be on time, and give the person some personal time also. So just to summarize, therefore, I see, nothing can beat daily communication or periodic communication. And the best part of this kind of, video conferencing facility is you can reach out to maximum number of people. So the earlier theory was that, I had to get everybody in a canteen or some auditorium to do a town hall or an open house. Actually, you can do open house sitting in the office, sitting at the comfort of your house. For example, we just tried this out in Alkem few days back, because the one set of people, they were not coming to work, they are working from home. So we did a virtual town hall. They had a lot of questions and we had to answer them. I think that reduces a lot of anxiety. So we have to figure out different ways to keep people motivated. It's just the beginning of this kind of, work style, I would say. Earlier, people used to request us for work from home policies, but now I think many people are also saying that, when do I work in office? So I think we have to learn both ways. I mean, it's of course, it's little lonely working at home because you are just sitting across, seeing your communication is vital. I think if we are able to connect with the leadership, peers, colleagues, people will feel kind of encouraged.
I agree. I think the whole culture has become become more humane. We're all in this together. Whether it is the MD, he's also working from home, or whether it is the front line. I'll just ask a quick leading question, Rajorshi, again, is on the productivity levels. I mean, whenever we spoke of work from home, I think the biggest issue was not so much about, person going away or anything else. It was just that kaam suffer karega. Productivity will suffer. How will I track? How will that change? What are some of the things that you think that organizations today can immediately deploy to redefine their KPIs? Therefore, they're able to measure the productivity at the same time, keep pace with the change time.
Sure. I think, see, look, certain kind of work cannot be done from home. We all know, like a factory or a research cannot run from home. I mean, at best, we are talking of, some of the jobs which are in offices. Now, if you ask me, I was wondering, last 6 weeks, I have seen my own organization, a substantial number of people are working from home. Of course, field force, I will leave them aside because they cannot go to and meet doctors or hospitals at this point of time. But if I look at the head office where, almost we have 600 employees, I have not seen actually, the work getting suffered. The productivity has not dipped. So it's a mental model that we had, before all this, that you have to be physically present to get the work done. I think slowly we will also kind of work out ways by which the same work can be delivered irrespective of how you are employed. And I also see probably it's what Preeti said, it's no more a 9-to-5 job. It can be other way around. I mean, typically, we had a notion that people should be employed with just one company. I feel people can be going forward employed with 2 companies. You be a part-timer, you just work for 3 days a week. So long as the work gets done, I don't mind where you are sitting. So just, coming and sitting in a physical building is not a substitute always to be productive. You can be productive sitting wherever you're operating for. So I think that's the change which we should be open to. Coming to productivity metrics and KPIs, I think that would evolve. To me, the most important KPI is the final output. The job is delivered. Like today, we are all operating, the salary is getting credited to the bank. So somewhere the payroll is operating, the finance department is working, we are getting materials in the factories, procurement department is working, the supply planning, production planning, people are at home, but it is getting executed. IT is getting service from wherever they are. legal help we are getting from wherever my legal colleagues are there. So what else you can ask for? The doctors and the doctors are getting connected. Retailers are getting medicines from our warehouses. So somewhere, it's the final output which is important. And I think that people are beginning to understand that it is possible, irrespective of your physical place of working.
Excellent. So now coming to Amit. Amit, what about and I'm more interested again on the performance evaluation part, because I think that's going to be a big challenge also, when we talk about, you talked about people possibly getting into an evaluation zone later in the year. At that time, how do you see the change in the performance matrices? How will the performance appraisal change or should change?
See, if you ask me today, there are a lot of employees who already have this question in mind, because we all have our workforces where some people, let's say 20%, are contributing 120%. The next 20% are contributing anywhere between 50 to 80%. And there is a large chunk that is contributing 50% or less by virtue of whatever they're working from home. We haven't been able to, we are struggling to enable a lot of workforce. And in a company like mine, or Rajorshi, is where you have a lot of field force where you can't go and meet customers, you can't go and source policy, it's a lockdown, you can't do it. So I think that anxiety is there. And it is for us as HR leaders to get the leadership team together to say, let us start to recalibrate our own metrics as to on what are we going to measure ourselves. And I think that time of recalibration is now, to say how do we recalibrate our measures. And the recalibration doesn't mean that we have to lower our numbers or whatever. It also means to look at what is it that we are going to achieve, what is now important, and how the weightages have changed. I think that's the first step. And then you communicate that down to each function and say, how is that performance going to be? And that's the time, now that we are in May, when June, July, people do recalibration. Like in Aviva, we do 5 conversations in a year. So, May is the time where we start our 3rd conversation of the year from a performance standpoint. And that's where you encourage people to say, in your next discussion, you not only talk about achievement, but you talk about recalibration of your goals and metrics. I think that's the first right step to do. Okay. After that, as you evolve, so, one doesn't know whether the lockdown will come again in June or July. God forbid, it may again come for a month. We don't know how the virus will impact. And that has to be more dynamic. So, the goal sheet today have to be a living document, which is a dream come true for every HR professional who said to every manager, your goal sheet should be a living, talking, breathing document. And actually this is the time to make that happen from a performance standpoint. I think the other thing that one needs to look at is the impact that, so in an insurance industry like ours, we have to start to look at how we bring in the digital element to help enable people to perform, whether it is from a customer sales standpoint or a service standpoint. And those parameters become very, very important. I'll give you an example from our industry where, servicing a customer through a chat or an online is one thing, but teaching a customer how to use the tool is also becoming an important part of your job today. You first have to get that customer to understand what the customer needs to do, teach the customer, and then let the customer experience and fulfill. So I think all of these have to now start to be inbuilt in your job performing metrics. I may have a self-service chat. That is just not a performance metrics of how many chats I answered, how many customers I made sure that I help them resolve through a chat or online digital means and close the query is another new metrics that will come. So that all conversations need to happen now for an organization to be able to take away that anxiety.
Deepshikha, if I may add something on the productivity piece, So as people, we commuted, back and forth to office, and these times have brought in sharp contrast to the number of hours that we spent just commuting, right? So as an employee, we lost so much time, but the organization didn't gain that time, right? It was just lost. So we realized that time can now be fruitfully, employed, used. And in terms of productivity, this is also a time for the manager and the team members to have structured conversations or contracting of what needs to be delivered. Because right now, see, people just got thrown into the situation. Nobody prepared them. There was no, 101 document or circular that went to people, right? How to manage in COVID times. So whatever people knew, they're evolving. There's not been a formal communication to say, as manager, employee, leaders, this is how you should contract your work, or KRAs and KPIs. But going forward, there is not going to be post-COVID, right? It's just going to be post-lockdown. So we need to be far more, I think, leadership team coming together, team managers coming together, figuring out how do you engage with teams? How do you ensure that the KRAs are very, very clearly defined and articulated, given that they may not be in person coming to office, right? Being highly sensitive of the time that when your support staff is not available, they also have to care for ailing parents, probably young children, cooking, or the household chores, etc. And all of that is there. So we have to be sensitive both for the women and the men, right, who also are contributing, I see, tremendously nowadays, right, to say how do all of this, then what does it mean for us? And what is the balance then we all get out of this, in terms of, so that work should never suffer, that comes first. And what Rajorshi very, very articulately mentioned, that get a balance in terms of your timing, get a rhythm in there, right? So it's not like you're at home and you're working from home, right? So that message has to be very, very clear.
So
let me ask you.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I just take a minute and share? So, something like we've kind of defined and said, when you work from home, 10 to 1 is your time to work. 1 to 2:30 is again your time to give your, if you're a caregiver, look after your kids, and then from 2:30 to 6:30. So while an individual has a choice to structure his or her day, but that's the common slot where you need to get into meetings, calls, and no one will schedule them outside of these times. So kind of bring a semblance, like, both of them said, and integrate that, help integration of that work at home and work from home, like I said.
That's fantastic, Amit. I have to commend you on that.
Yeah.
That's a very, very credible thing, because I think being at home, most of the people have kind of said they're far busier because there is no work-life balance per se, right? Everything is work. So the other question which I would want to ask, and Preeti, extending our point there, is that how do you see the role of human resource leader now changing? In some ways, a lot of people have said that today a human resource leader like yourselves, the three leaders that are sitting here with us today, are now more powerful than the CEO himself. And because it's your first responsibility to take care of people, everything else comes next. So what do you think, what are the changes that you've seen? And for the HR leaders who've joined us today in this conversation, for those who are watching us, what are your suggestions to them? 3 things that they could do to sail through the situation.
I think the first one, Rajorshi, is, like I said, there's no one-on-one. Everybody just trying to evolve and see what is working, what is not for their respective cultures and organizations here. But as leaders, if I had to say, of course, put people first, because if you have people staying around, right, and people, the stickiness with the organization enhances, right? The engagement is far deeper there, right? And the business continuity will happen. I have yet to see an individual who in these times, even my own team members, and they work really long hours, again, days melt into another, and we never know when one day starts and another ends. But I haven't seen anybody say no to work. So it is a reciprocal relationship where people are being put first by the organizations and leaders, and employees reciprocate likewise, right? The second is a massive culture shift. To say, what is our value? We're going back to our values of, people first, keeping people at the front and center of everything that we do, and also building deeper connects with the employees, going back to the absolute basic core of what the organization stands for. So as an HR leader, if you can enable your leaders and your managers, your ecosystems to have that empathy, to have a leadership where you are not only a role model in terms of how you manage, balance your life, your time, your priorities, but, connecting what Rajorshi mentioned, that over communication is absolutely critical. Absolutely. Please be in touch, right? Because social media, the news channels, your WhatsApp universities, right? There's so much fake news around that people tend to just believe everything. Yeah? So as an organization, what is right, what is credible, that communication has to be constantly outgoing there to each employee, so that people don't have to wonder, what does it mean for me, right? But the organization states very, very categorically that, listen, this is what it means for us, right? These are the values. When you come back, how are we planning the coming back, right? If at all we are right now, yeah? The third one, I think, is keeping it absolutely simple to say, end of the day, people really, really matter to us, yeah? As a leader, as a manager, what are you doing for them today? If they are in trouble, please go out of your way, help them. Very basic things, Deepshikha, these are not the times where I'm saying you have to recreate the world or we can find a cure, right? But as managers, as leaders, if we can ensure that we are there for our people in whatever times that they need, whatever support that they need, and communicate with them regularly, be available for them, and if we can guide them in the right manner to say, these are the opportunities also to take care of your family, but focus on the work as well, upskill yourself, I think that will be fantastic.
Fantastic. I'll now move to my last question before we take the closing remarks and then the audience engagement is to Rajorshi. Rajorshi, we talked about engagement, and I think with the changing dynamics, trainings and upskilling, as both Amit and Preeti had mentioned, will become extremely part of engagement with each other. But with the so what do you think, when will the online or rather the offline engagement begin from a training and learning perspective? When do you think this will come? And do you think that online learning will become a de facto standard in training, given that it's cheaper, it's more accessible, widely reusable?
Yeah, I think the way I see things evolving is the coexistence of both. Of course, right now we have shifted probably 80% physical offline training to now 100% online training. We are filling this gap over the last 1.5 months, 2 months. And I'm sure every company is trying their best to skill their people, keep them engaged, through a variety of methods, whether it's in-house training, through external webinars, tie up with universities, variety of methods. I see that, this has accelerated the online training or digital training, as we all called it. We wanted to do this, but I think somehow this has accelerated. I don't see physical training coming back so early, because people will be apprehensive of traveling, coming to a physical place to get the learning. Maybe it will pick up after 8 months, 9 months, or a year. And after that, I think I see a coexistence of both, maybe more online, because by then I think this field also would have innovated a lot. The offerings would be much more, it would be interesting, and people will be also willing, because earlier the notion was, I need to be present in a classroom to get learning. People are now understanding that online education training is also something one can do. Of course, the format of online training and education needs to be very encouraging, and interesting, so that the learners' attention is there and they feel that they are learning the right way. So, for example, just a plain slide method or a voice method may not work, but a professor coming online, teaching like this, like we are doing a webinar, it makes sense. And in fact, I see a huge potential for this, because earlier suppose I had to get a professor from a Ivy League or a Harvard, I had to fly him or her down to India. I can probably, utilize that resource or capability sitting wherever I am. I think that's opening up a lot. So it's a universal marketplace of education, you can call it. And I think every organization will benefit from it, supported again by different kind of technology, whether it's mobile, laptop, or online, cloud-based, PLCs, personal learning, cloud. There are various ways people can learn, and I see that going forward, probably what used to be 80% classroom, 20% off classroom, it may somewhere settle around maybe 50-50 or even 60-40, 60 to more on virtual side.
Excellent.
I just want to add on something. Yes. I agree with Rajorshi on all that he said. I think the only thing that we need to watch out as HR leaders is, they always existed, the offline, online coexisted, but I think we need to watch out is the online fatigue, which sets in faster than an offline training fatigue. So the online training fatigue sets much faster, and that's what we need to watch out against in the new world, or as the post-lockdown world that we see. So I think that's a call out that I wanted to make there.
No, you're absolutely right. And right now everybody is trying to do everything. It's an overdose of training, even webinars, different kind of thing. But I think it will kind of settle down. Right now, everybody is trying to innovate, run fast, please people. So I think there is an overdose of it.
Great, great. I think it feels good when people say that the leaders like yourselves are trying to please the employees. I think that's a massive comforting factor as well. My very last question, and again, Rajorshi, to you would be, as an HR leader at an organization level, what are the three areas of cost cutting that you would see, and what are the three areas of investment that you would see in the near to midterm scenario?
I think again, it could be industry agnostic. It's not necessarily to do with my industry. I think from a investment, I see in critical talent.
Okay.
Again, criticality of talent would vary from company or an industry to industry. When I say critical, absolutely those talent who brings in creativity, innovation, and it could cut across functions. So there, every company will invest. And all of us would like to onboard people across functions who bring that kind of competency. I think the next biggest investment will be on technology. Technology, automation, and it could again cut across functions. Technology could be there in how you do sales, how do you engage with your customer, how do you do your manufacturing, how do you do research. I see a lot of investment in technology, and it can be virtual, it can be different way. I think the third investment would be, how do you kind of, simplify things. Again, it's an extension of my last point where I said technology. While we bring technology, how do you make the whole thing very simple? So how do you make the business model so simple that the customers kind of look up to you and engage with you deeply? I think because that would be probably every company would like to invest. From a cost cutting, I think some of the obvious ones where I think it's coming. I think in the physical space. The earlier world was investing on in the huge offices, floors, office spaces. Probably this experience has opened our eyes, and we may not need such huge offices. That's what I can see probably is coming. There would be some cost cutting on how you kind of man your work. So I see some employee cost cutting. When I say employee cost cutting, it's to make the organization more nimble, productive. Again, it can vary from industry to industry. And I think I'm not sure about what could be a third area of cost cutting. Maybe my co-panelist can help. But I see some cost cutting, on unnecessary work that we were doing so far. For example, what I mean is, we had huge paperwork, and I think many organizations still do have a lot of paperwork. I don't know how much cost it has, but in the last 2 months, we are seeing we can actually run offices without any paper. So probably there are such kind of resources which are already there, and paper probably is one example where it was probably in that model of working we needed it, but going forward such kind of resources and items we may not require. So we'll again getting back to keep the work simple. So I think these are my kind of ideas on cost cutting and investment.
Fantastic. I love the paper one. Yes, Preeti, please add.
Quick one here. So I was just reading 2-3 days ago, yes, that TCS has come out with this 25 by 25 model, which is a business model, saying that by 2025 they want to ensure that 75 of their workforce, 75% is working remotely, right? Which means it doesn't necessarily mandate that your workspace or infrastructure cost would proportionately come down, right? Because you might have to invest heavily in a remote infrastructure, ensuring that people have secure data and broadband and the connectivity, everything, right? And ensuring that people have machines, etc. But it's a great welcome thing, because it could mean that time, that the bandwidth that people have, extra bandwidth, right? 75% of your population. So where do we use that talent? Where is that opportunity to leverage? It will be a good one to just for leaders to sit and think about that.
Fantastic.
I may just like to add something. It struck
Yes.
me because didn't come to me when I was responding. I think another area where, cost cutting I see is meetings and travels and conferences.
Yes.
And when I say meeting, travels and conferences, it is internal.
Mm.
Like, for us, like we have almost 10,000 sales force, and there are continuous meetings of different nature across the country. And I was talking to my business heads, and they said in the last 45 days, they have been, fulfilling all those meetings through this virtual method and thereby cutting costs by 80%.
Wow.
So, they are also realizing probably earlier they were flying from one city to another, from next city to the other on the next day. But really, was it necessary or not? So I think now some of these learning would evolve and assimilate. And probably I'm not saying it will be 100% zero travel, but I think people will be more frugal and would make such travel and meeting physical only, which is important, necessary.
And also not travel 12 hours for a 2-hour meeting, so.
Exactly.
Amit, your views?
No, I think both of them have covered most of the points, but from where I see a lot of investment would go in, while, Rajorshi and Preeti have both said about technology. I just want to bring it far closer home and say that irrespective of what the businesses are going to, when I say technology, I mean, it's image and data. And I think those are the two parts which will look at all parts of all functions, whether you are in HR, in finance, in sales, the image and the data combination, I think will be the key investment, whether it's from a customer standpoint or an employee standpoint. I think that's for me the one of the biggest things that will seek our thing. The other thing that I think we will all start to invest is in a lot of risk management tools. So if you look at our BCP plans, everyone had a BCP plan. But when the lockdown happened, all plans went for a toss because your BCP was a site in a different city, in a different location with a different vendor. But no one could use that, right? And all cities went in lockdown, all vendors couldn't come to work. And how do you then start to look at and invest in a new BCP model, which may include work from home for all employees, which may include more cloud-based, which may include accessibility for stuff that you need to do. Maybe it is now a time to have a BCP vendor outside of your country if it's a localized pandemic. So I think that's where the investments are starting to go. Will start to be a lot more focused. So
great. Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for wonderful views. I think this time we've had such a long conversation and such an intriguing one that we've already overshot time, but we'll quickly take the questions. I think some of them we've covered, but there's an interesting one which is coming from an anonymous attendee. He or she asks, how do you define the new work-life balance?
So I'll take that. I think we all talked about getting work-life integration from balance, and people are now experiencing it. And it will start to, earlier, we had work, we had life, and everyone wanted balance or integration. Now it's coming home. Now it's between the people who will say, how do I manage my work life at home? And it will become a very personal decision. So like Preeti said earlier, for a caregiver who has to travel 2 hours a day, one way to come to office, the caregiver, both male or female, may say, I'd stay at home and do a work. For a young Gen Z or a millennial who thrives in collaboration and being with people, may want to still come to work. For a working couple, that may be the only way respite is to go to their offices separately and keep their work life separate from home. For some people, it's about finding space. If you can't find space in a home, you then start to go to work. So I think it will become an individual choice. But what will happen is, I think that whole boundary of 9 to 5, 10 to 6 will definitely go away. Organizations will be far more open to say, come when you want to, go when you want to, work from home. That fungibility and that timekeeping will go with the fungibility will come in. So fluidity in terms of choice is something that's the new mantra on work-life balance.
Absolutely.
Just want to add to what Amit said, Deepshikha. I think it'll be important as leaders and business leaders and HR leaders to ensure that we don't slide back into the absolute old practices and become regressive all over again when the world starts to resemble some sort of normalcy, right? It'll be important to learn the lessons and stay with them, because there's a lot of good as well that we have discovered, right? In terms of people working, it's a lot of work practices, the talent, the dependability, the responsibility of individuals, how organizations have shown up, community service, etc. So there's a lot of good that's come through. And I would like to add that we should stay, keep the good and not let it slide back. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Ruturaj Tanak asks, COVID and the after effects have actually played with the employee's psyche. What are the 4 to 5 things which we should do immediately after we go back to work to resume some kind of normalcy? Rajorshi, you want to take that?
Okay, let me understand the question.
So they're saying that आप एक बार वापस जब काम पे जाएंगे, so what are the say the top 3 things that you would do to at least set the tone that it's okay, it's all normal, people are psychologically upset, pressured?
Yeah, I think the most important is when you go back to work and start, office as usual. It will not be usual for sure. So there will be, I see, a set of people who will be required to come to office, and maybe there will be some set of people who would be kind of, asked to work from home for some time,
Yeah.
or alternate between office and home. I think first is you have to assure people that office is safe. Because today, after all this scare, people are also apprehensive of going out, using mass public system, transport system, etc. So make the workplace more safe, secure, and the employees will have to also change their habits. The way they were used to operating in an office, I think that communication should go, and the employees should be engaged. For example, people were used to sitting in a certain way, doing meeting in a certain way. It's not going to happen so easily. We are all like, I'm sure all organizations are formulating their rules, how they would operate post the lockdown, etc. And I think third important is, addressing the anxiety of people. People will be anxious, because am I really, valued anymore? Is the work, do my work exist? And all these questions will be everybody's mind, right from the senior most person to the junior most person. I think some of these should be handled periodically through open and transparent communication. I think that's the way I see, and it will kind of become probably a new norm, as they call it, new normal over a period of time. And we will also learn, today we are all locked at home. So we'll all also learn to work in a new office, new normal after some point of time.
I just want to add to what Rajorshi said is about anxiety, and I want to extend it and build on it to say a lot of people are facing mental health issues these days, right? Because it might be job related anxiety, family, could be space, multiple things, right? I think being secluded or being just alone or in that tight space, it has triggered different things in people, right? And there are a lot of forums where I keep hearing there are friends who are mental health professionals, and they say they have seen an exponential jump in the number of concerns or causes that they are seeing. So that is something as an organization that we could pick up, right, and address it. Will be great.
Perfect. My next question is, I think any one of us can take it, is an interesting one, which Katie asks, what are the best ways to hire and onboard employees remotely, given that you can't see them, you can't meet them? How do you hire?
I think I can take it, and maybe others can add. We are already doing, obviously all of us, at least the final interview we wanted to do face to face. But today I think we have kind of agreed that, whatever critical talent we need to hire, we will do over video or video calls or whatever, do the usual ref check, and move on and make the offers. Even our joinings, at least some of the critical joinings which we took over the last 6 weeks, we do it remotely. So there are today, of course, all these technologies are available, tools are available. We also did induction online, sitting at home. So one of the HR person, took the shared about the company, did the rhythm, obvious induction protocols. They were welcomed by senior leaders. So I think it's not fully effective, we agree, but I think it is possible. So that at least we do not lose the time and wait for everything to get normal, then start the physical or the face-to-face interviews. So today these are possible and most companies are doing it.
Mm. Great. Yes.
Just to add on, like we've done our whole summer induction plan online, right from onboarding to everything. And we just did it normally, from the CEO's address to the whole 3-day, 4-day induction, went online with people, and feedback, instant feedback, all of that just worked. So it's the new normal, as they call it.
Great. Perfect. So I think we've hit the time, and I still see some unanswered questions. We would try to take these questions to the panelists and bring them back, the answers to you individually. And anything else, closing remarks, panelists?
I'd just like to add that, first of all, again, thank you so much for inviting. A lovely discussion, great questions and answers from the co-panelist. I've realized that relationships that had been built on trust, those relationships have stood the test of time now, because you could go back to managers with your queries and concerns. So whenever we go back, or even right now, if we can continue building those relationships of trust with our employees, our team members, that's something that leaders can also focus on.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. Amit?
Great. I think, sorry, Amit, you can.
No, go ahead, Rajorshi. Rajorshi, go ahead.
No, I think, my closing remarks would be, this is, all of us know it's a crisis across the world and every country is touched. So I think my message and closing remarks would be, we should take it as an opportunity also.
Yeah.
Crisis, I think every crisis, opens a new door. I think that with that confidence, all of us should accept this and, look forward.
Great.
I just wanted to say that I think it's we talk about employees and organizations, but actually building on to what Rajorshi said, it's an opportunity for the leaders to ask themselves, challenge their own mindsets. They have broken hierarchies to get things done for the customer. They need to sustain that and break those hierarchies, and they have learned new skills of being with people, and those are the skills that they need to carry. So I think it's more an opportunity for the leaders to reflect and come out new in this.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Preeti, Amit, Rajorshi. You are in your own rights the COVID warriors. You are taking care of thousands of people and keeping the spirits and growth alive. Thank you very much for joining us today. It was wonderful having a conversation with you.